Welcome to 5% Radio, where it's all about learning like no one else today so you can live like no one else tomorrow. Please be sure to share and subscribe. Hello and welcome to episode 24 of the 5% Radio podcast. Today I want to really talk to you about something that is, arguably the most important thing when it comes to changing your life, and that is the power of your imagination, the ability that you have to create your own future, to write your own script, to shift your own story in any given direction that you want to. And I've not really talked about this before. I've hinted, I've touched on it here and there, but I've not actually really dove into this topic. But I want to talk to you about the power of your creative imagination. Now, if you look at everything we have nowadays in the modern world, we have cars and we have planes. We've gone to space multiple times. We have satellites orbiting the globe. We've explored other planets. We have trains that will travel at, just ridiculous speeds. We have vehicles that will go over 300 miles an hour. We have cars that have been powered by, everything from gasoline to large batteries. We've got all of these magnificent creations. We have smartphones. We have the power of radio. We have all of these different things that if you were to look at them from the outside and you say, okay, well, that thing just is, it's not really a spectacular, jaw-dropping, awe-inspiring, wow, I can't believe this sort of thing. But at one point, everything we now have that exists in your external outer reality, in the world we experience, was at first an idea in someone's mind. And this actually just hit me the other day. I was driving down the interstate and we're doing, I think we were doing almost 80 miles an hour, and the gentleman next to me is just on his phone. And it kind of hits me that he's basically in his own world, the cockpit of his car. He can have whatever music, whatever temperature. He can have his phone. He can have, whatever he wants in that environment to go 70 miles an hour down the road. We just take it for granted that that's just the way that we're able to live. But at one point, that would have been an astounding, scientific, creative feat that someone made a vehicle that would go that fast at top speeds. And he's just cruising, one hand on the wheel, talking on a smartphone that he can be connected with anyone in the world within seconds, and he can pick up reception through the air. Just all these things that we look at nowadays, and you're like, I've never really thought about it, but I want you to think about it right now because I want to talk to you about imagination. See, everything in your life was at first a thought. I've talked about this before in episode 1, thoughts, feelings, actions, results. My thoughts determines my actions lead to my results. Thoughts determine my feelings determine my actions lead to results, So thoughts, feelings, actions, results. So everything in my life that is now in my external outer reality, and I don't want to sound woo-woo or, too, weird out there about this. I don't want you to think, man, that guy's lost it. But I've been doing a lot of reading lately about the mind, about the power specifically of the subconscious mind, about visualization, about creative imagination, and about really how you can shift things. You can shift your outer world by what you really begin to believe and work on internally, not in a weird sort of way. But think about this. Have you ever imagined something negative was going to happen, and you replay that scenario over and over and over and over and over again, and then boom, guess what? It happens. To give you an example of this, I knew that I was going to be running at a local, I was going to say the name, but that means nothing to any of you that are not anywhere near where I live. So I knew that I was going to be running in a somewhat of a national park that we have close to the area. And I knew that I was going to be running there about 2 weeks before I actually got to go there. It was a work thing. This was years ago when I had just a regular job. And I'm thinking about, man, I hope I don't roll my ankle. I hope I don't. And I'm going through the feelings and the sensations of what it would be like to roll my ankle on a tree root, running at a decent speed on this trail that was a couple miles up and a couple miles back down. I'm like, man, that'd be miserable. I hope that doesn't happen. And it was just kind of this fleeting passing, just real quick. I hope I don't roll my ankle. I hope I don't do that, over and over and over. Guess what happened? So I thought about that for weeks. That's imagination in one sense. I'll get to this in just a second, but that's the negative sense of imagination. I'm doing what's called worrying. So I'm creating a mental picture in my mind, the feelings, the sensations, exactly how I would experience that moment in reality. I'm creating a picture in a negative sense of something I don't want, and that's known as worry or dread. But because that happened, guess what happened on the run? We're about halfway, and everything was going great. boom, I step on a root and I roll that exact same ankle, and guess what? You'll never believe it. It felt exactly like I imagined it would, because that had happened before, so I knew what this feeling was. Now, I had not rolled my ankle in a very, 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 very long time running, but guess what was in the back of my mind the whole time? The whole time, I'm thinking about, man, I hope I don't roll my ankle. I hope I don't roll my ankle. I hope I don't roll my ankle. And guess what happened? Because I worried, because I literally pictured exactly what it would feel like, how running on it, walking on it would feel after that, exactly what that moment would be like in vivid, just colorful detail. Every sense that I could bring in, taste, touch, smell, everything. I'm like, oh, it would feel this way. It'd be so terrible. And I worried and worried and worried. And guess what? It happened. So I want you to understand that there are two different kinds of imagination, and I'm strictly going to separate this out. There's synthetic and there's creative. There's different things you can get into when it comes to imagination and your mental faculties here, what you can really do with your thinking. But I just want to talk about creative imagination. There was a book written by a gentleman in the late 60s, and his name was Dr. Maxwell Matlz, and he was a plastic surgeon, and he did countless surgeries on people to fix something on their face or whatever else that they thought, man, if I could just get rid of this thing, I would be beautiful. If I could just get rid of this thing, I would have confidence. If I could get rid of this thing, I would have a happy relationship. If I could fix this one thing externally about me, man, everything would change in my life. And what he found was some people, they would have the surgery, and within, 21 days, 3 weeks, maybe a little more, maybe 3 to 4 weeks. So within 3 to 4 weeks of their surgery, some people would have this radical transformational shift in their life where they went from being low confidence, introverted, kind of bashful to like, man, everything in their life changed. Now they're extroverted, they're outgoing, that they've got confidence with people, they feel like they're beautiful. Everything in their life has just completely shifted because this one thing externally was changed. But there was a second group of people that would have the same type of surgeries. And let's say a woman came in and thought, man, if I just had a different nose, then I would be beautiful. My picture of myself, the way that I see me would change if this thing external was different. So he would change the woman's nose. But what he came to realize is the internal picture, the self-image, the self-concept, the way that patient viewed themselves internally in their innermost thoughts. They might not tell it to you out loud, but the way that they really viewed themselves, if that did not change, there would be no shift that occurred. There would be no change. There would be no transformation that took place in that person's life. And what he began to realize is that the picture the person had in their mind was more important than anything else. It was more important than the outside flaw. It was more important than the scar. It was more important than the mole they wanted removed on their face. It was more important than their nose. It was more important than anything else. That it was more important than their jawline, their cheekbone structure, all the things that they said, if this was just fixed, then I would be complete. I would feel a certain way. And we can get into an entirely different discussion about the way that you view yourself and how you should never be negative and all this different stuff. But let's not go there right now. I just want you to stick with the topic of the person's mental picture determined their outer reality. Because again, person A and person B would have the same surgery. Person A would have this radical transformation. Person B would have nothing happen. It was almost as if nothing had changed. Even though something drastic outwardly had changed, something inwardly had never changed. And this is where we come to the power of creative imagination. Now, the self-concept, the way that you view yourself is so important because here's the deal. If someone has a picture in their mind of, I will never succeed, and it bothers me even to say negative things like that out loud, because I believe there's a lot of power in our words. Now, I don't believe that we are, gods with a small g, and that we're creators and that we can speak things into existence and that we have the same creative power that when God spoke the world into existence that he lives within. I don't believe any of that weird, wacky. I think I read that stuff sometimes and I'm like, all right, this dude's whacked. I don't believe that in that sense, but I do believe that your thoughts have an ability to change things. That if I dwell on something long enough, I will begin to act in a way that is conducive to me getting that result in my life. For example, if I dwell in a positive sense on a goal over and over, Napoleon Hill called this auto-suggestion. In one of his chapters in Think and Grow Rich, he called this auto-suggestion, meaning auto, self, suggest. I'm feeding myself an idea over and over and over and over. If I suggest something to you, I say, hey, fill in your name here. Have you thought about blank? Hey, maybe you should do this. I put something in your mind. Auto-suggestion is me feeding myself the same thought over and over and over and over and over again. And when it comes to creative imagination, not in the negative sense, but in the positive sense of what do I want to construct, I want you to take a moment. And one of the things that I talked about very, very, very early on in the show, within the first couple of episodes, is having a goal. You've got to know what you want. Napoleon Hill, again, in his landmark book, Think and Grow Rich, said that you had to have a burning desire, something that was just absolute. I've got to have this. You've got to have something that you want so much that I'm willing to sacrifice morally, ethically, anything that I can do that would not take me below the line of what is right and wrong. Anything else, if it's moral, legal, and ethical, I'm willing to do it because I have a burning desire to have this goal. I have a passion behind why I want this. And if you have that thing, if you have a burning desire, then I want you to begin practicing auto-suggestion. I want you to begin telling yourself that goal over and over. I am this. I want you to begin living as if that were your reality now. And this comes into a different topic that Bob Proctor talked about, where you should not go to the goal, meaning, what do I have to do to get there? You should come from the goal. And I'm going to switch gears here for just a second and then pull it back into creative imagination and what Maxwell Matlz called the theater of the mind. But when you talk about coming to versus from a goal, here's what that means. Coming to a goal means I want to make this much money per year. I want to make, let's say, an extra. So I want to go from making $100,000 to $250,000 this next year. Let's just say, random example, just because it's, like money and weight loss are kind of just black and white examples. People can, okay, yep, that makes sense. Okay, so I make this year. So I want to, let's just say, general rule, I want to double what I make this year. So if you're making 70 grand, I want to make 140 next year. Let's just round up 150. I want to make $150,000. So I want to more than increase my income. And I want you to begin to ask yourself, instead of going to that goal saying, man, I'm going to work super hard and I'm going to try to double my income. I'm going to do everything it takes. And I'm going to work really hard to get to that goal. I want you to ask yourself this one question. How does a person that makes that money in what I do, how do they act? That question right there just takes some pause. If you're taking notes, if you're not driving, then I want you to take a note on this. How does a person who, insert your goal there, act? How does someone who is world-class at what I do, how does a person who has already achieved what I would like to achieve act? How do they act? How do they live? How do they talk, walk, dress? Everything about them. What things do they do habitually that I need to adopt? Because if I can come from the goal, meaning I'm living as if I am already in that circumstance, if I can live every single day in this future reality, not false, not artificial, not made up story, but this is a future picture of who I want to be. If I can hold that picture clearly enough of what I want, who I want, where I want to live, the lifestyle that I want to have, the person that I want to be, if I can hold that picture in my mind every single day, auto-suggestion, I'm imagining just like me imagining, don't roll your ankle over and over and over again. If I can hold that picture, then what happens is I begin to get pulled towards that goal. Instead of pushing myself, trying to stay, I got to motivate myself. I got to watch more YouTube videos. I got to stay inspired. I got to read these affirmations, and I got to put my goal all over my mirror. And I got to tell myself, you can do it. You can do it. I'm the little engine that could. I think I can. Instead of trying, and there's nothing wrong with some of that stuff. There's nothing wrong with pumping yourself up. There's nothing wrong with putting your goal in a place that you can look at it every single day. I look at my goals multiple times a day, especially first thing in the morning when I wake up. I look at them, I write them out, I picture what would it be like to be there. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I want you to do is ask yourself, what would it be like if I had already achieved that thing? How would I live? How would I feel? What would that experience be like? And then from then on, what kind of person would I be? Just to give you a personal example of this, I actually did this for, I think it was about 64 days. I did this before I switched gears into something else because it wasn't quite exactly what I felt like was giving me the most bang for my buck time investment wise. But at one point, I was actually journaling every single day of the type of person that would speak on stages all over the world. That would be a world-class teacher, coach, mentor, author, speaker, because this is something that I want to create a picture of for my future life that I want to begin to live in that reality now in my mind, not in a weird sort of way, but if I want to be that person, how does that person act? How do they communicate? What do others say when they talk about that person? When that person gets done speaking, how does the audience feel about, man, that person just, they knew how to communicate. They held the audience in their hand. They're an absolute world-class teacher. They're so articulate. They communicate so well. They share ideas in such an easily understandable way that anyone can grasp what they're trying to say. You know what? That there's such a great, I have a light bulb moment every time they hit the stage. That how does that person get talked about by others? How are they viewed by others? How do they feel in and of themselves? What are their habits? How would I feel speaking as that person? What would it be like to travel the world as a speaker? Not just in the generic sense, oh, that'd be cool, taking planes. Like, no. What would it feel like to wake up and to be that person? And I began to journal this every single day, about 15 minutes a day. And it was great. And I actually did notice that I started receiving a lot more remarks on how my delivery when I spoke during anything, whether it was business or ministry. And anytime I spoke, I began to get more and more compliments. And this isn't me tooting it's just telling you like this works. I began to get more compliments of, man, you really explain that well, or, you know, I can tell you're getting way more comfortable speaking. Your ability to communicate is increasing. Man, something has really changed. And I began to get all these remarks, and I realized that, man, all I've done is I begin to put a picture. I begin to auto-suggest. I begin to give myself a clear picture of this is who I want to be and how I want to feel, live, who I want to be in the future. And I'm trying to pull myself to that every single day so I can live from that versus to it. So I want to ask you, what is your goal? What is your goal, and how can you live as that person now? How can you act as if, and how can you engage all of the feelings in that? There's a book that I talked about recently in one of the episodes, and it was The Ant and the Elephant by Vince Vicente. And in this book, he gives the analogy of visualization being a large, like 50-gallon drum of water. And every single day that I visualize, every time I try to think about, okay, what would it feel like, sound like, taste like, smell like, you know, what all of the inputs, the more sensory I can bring into this, and everything from how would I feel physically to how would I feel emotionally to what would I be hearing to what would I be smelling, what would I be seeing, everything about that you can bring in all 5 of your senses: feel, taste, touch, sound, sight, everything. Feel, taste, touch, sound, sight. How can I bring all of my senses, everything that my body uses, that my mind uses to experience reality today, how can I bring that into this visualization? What would it be like to live in that house, to make that money, to have that career advancement? How would I feel from being that person, from looking out of their eye sockets, living that, already having achieved the thing that I want? What would that be like? See, the thing is that you don't need to puff yourself up and pump yourself up and get yourself amped and every day I gotta work on this. And I said that earlier, but you don't have to do. All you have to do is live from that reality. Experience tomorrow's reality today, over and over and over. Let me give you a palpable example of this that almost every single listener can understand. If you are married or in a serious relationship, when you began getting to know that person, you pictured every single moment of every single day, what would it be like for them to be mine? What would it be like for me and that person to be in a relationship? What would it be like to be married to them, to wake up every single day with them? And you pictured what this would be like over and over and over and over and over again. And at one point in the relationship, you either went from friends to dating or dating to engaged or engaged to married. And if you've gone from strangers basically to meeting to married, there was a point in the relationship when it really kind of solidified and you're like, yep, like we're a thing. And then there was another point where it flipped and you're like, you know what, like we've moved on from dating to marriage. There was a shift that happened in the relationship because you no longer saw yourself as a picture of a couple that was dating. You now saw yourself as a married couple. Therefore, you must move from the state of dating into marriage because the picture of us dating, staying together in this sense, in this state of our lives, no longer really agree, but we are in agreement that we are more likely to agree with the picture of us being married. So because we relate more with being married than dating, we're moving into that picture. And I know that you might not have thought about this as a conscious, like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I thought. I visualized every day intentionally. No, you might not have done that, but you thought about the person all the time. And guess what? You got them. Your career that you have now, if it's what you really wanted to do. My wife is a bachelor's degree registered nurse. She stays at home now as a full-time mom, but for years and years and years, from the time she was a little girl, I'm talking 5 years old, she wanted to be a nurse, and she thought about it all the time. She's got letters from her dad when she was like 6 years old that he was talking about her being a nurse. It was in her mind over and over. So for her, she didn't have to fight super hard and push herself every day. I've got to get through nursing school. Like, it was just a picture in her brain of, this will be my future. Well, she's playing house as a little kid, basically, and she's the nurse. Like, this was a picture that she held in her mind over and over and over and over again. When I was younger, I had a particular goal in business, and I would visualize it every single day for about 30 minutes first thing in the morning and 30 minutes right before I went to bed. And I would experience it as if I was actually in that situation. I would literally all the way down. So getting recognized for hitting that goal, I would picture every single thing about it. And it got to the point where I would literally be able to picture, what do my, like, weird stuff, what's my suit jacket feel like when I wave to the audience as I'm getting recognized for this? How, when you wave in a jacket and it kind of pulls across your body, that feeling, what's that feel like? How's the collar feel around my neck? How do my slacks feel against my legs as I walk? How do my socks feel? And this all sounds like, man, this is getting weird, but like, when you visualize it, it needs to be in this much detail. How do my feet feel standing in my shoes? What's the floor? That's that solid feeling that you have in a certain pair of shoes, of like just the contact with the floor. You can feel the soles of your feet making contact with the bottom of your shoe, and you can feel that firm foundation, that feeling of like it's a sturdy floor. It's not a second-story wooden floor in an old 1850s house. Like, if I were to stomp, it's concrete underneath my foot, like that sort of thing. What's it feel like to walk on the stage? What does it feel like to grab the microphone from the speaker after I shook hands with them and tell the audience, thank you for being here. What does that feel like? And I would go through this every single night, every single morning, morning and night, over and over and over and over and over. And guess what happened? Before I knew it, I had hit that goal. I had been recognized for it. And when things like this happen, because I've already spent so much time living there, I began to walk and talk and act like the person that had already achieved that goal, thinking about it all the time. What would it be like for that to happen? What would it be? How would that person act? How would they dress? How would they talk to people? When they sat down with someone, how would they present themselves? When they spoke, how do they speak? How do they carry themselves? How do they move a crowd? How do they address an audience? Everything about it. How do they move when they're on stage? Do they stand still? Do they pace calmly? Do they speak with posture and authority, and the audience feels like, man, this person knows what they're doing? Everything about it. And Dr. Maxwell Matlz called this the theater of the mind. And here's how you do this. I want you to get a song. Those of you that actually take this, by the way, and practice it, I don't care what your goal is, if you do this consistently, I go back to the 50-gallon drum. Every time you visualize, it's like dropping a small drop of blue dye into that 50-gallon drum. Imagine a white 50-gallon drum. It's got totally, perfectly clear water in it, and you are visualizing every single day. And every single time you visualize, whether it's 10 times a day or twice a day, first thing in the morning, right before bed, whatever it is, every time you visualize and you feel what it would be like to be that person, to accomplish that goal, to do that thing, and you have that feeling of just like, I did it, and you're living from that person into today. How do they talk? How do they walk? How do they carry themselves? How do they live? What style of home do they live in? How do they act? How do they carry themselves? Everything about it, not in a weird way, but man, what would it be like if I had already accomplished that goal or dream? How would I as a person live in my day-to-day life? What would that feel like in every single sense of the word? What would it feel like? Again, sight, taste, touch, sound, feeling. How can I engage all of those senses? Every time I do that, I want you to picture turning a little knob, and you're getting just a little drop, one drop of blue dye into that white 50-gallon drum. And over time, that thing, eventually, it's unnoticeable at first. And then all of a sudden, it begins to turn light blue. And if I continue, drip, 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 day after day, moment by moment, thinking about what would it be like, and I begin to revisit that over and over and over and over again, I'm taking from my conscious mind that I'm embedding that. I'm giving my subconscious mind basically a blueprint, a command of this is what I want, and I will begin to naturally act more like that person. I will begin to come from that goal versus to, because I have experienced it over and over and over and over again. And eventually that 50-gallon white drum, that barrel, will eventually be dark blue water if I continue to do it. But it's not something you do one day and quit for a week and go back to it. This needs to be over and over and over and over and over again. And I would find a song that gets you in a focused state. I would find a song that gets you pumped up, maybe that gets you the ability to focus and picture that scenario. I would play that song and I would picture everything about it the same every single time. All 5 senses: sight, taste, touch, sound, feeling. All 5 senses you can engage. Everything about that situation, everything about opening the door with your own key to the house that you just purchased, getting in the car that you just bought cash, taking that dream vacation, getting that raise, hitting that level in your business, achieving that relational landmark where you go from maybe dating the person you're with now to marriage, whatever that is. A bank account balance. Man, what's it like to log into your bank account and to see that balance? Go in some photo editing software and edit a screenshot of your bank balance. I've done this. Edit a screenshot of your bank balance and make it the balance that you want it to be. And don't go look at your real bank balance and be like, oh, I'm $400,000 away. Like, don't go do, like, pull up that screenshot every day that looks like you just logged into your real bank account and picture what would it feel like financially to have that security in the bank, man. How much peace would I have about no matter what came financially, I'm okay. Picture all of those things in vivid detail. Go through this over and over and literally treat this like a movie. But don't treat it like you're watching yourself. Treat it like you're in that moment. You're looking out your own eyeballs. You're not watching yourself as a person in the audience. You're there experiencing that as it was reality. You're experiencing the future today and live in that moment as often as you can. When you're driving down the road, be daydreaming about that moment, what it feels like, what it sounds like, smells like, tastes like, feel, all of those things. Be doing this over and over and over again. Be turning that bucket from clear water to light blue to medium blue to dark, dark, dark blue because you're doing this every single day and it becomes a muscle. If you work it over and over and over again, you have to keep the vision the same. Don't be changing it every single day. Add as much detail as you can, but don't visualize, thing A one day and then the next day you're like, I'm going to visualize thing B because that's called confusion and a confused mind never makes a decision. Dr. Maxwell Matlz talking about the theater of the mind, Einstein saying imagination is more important than knowledge. In the many stories that I've shared with you, I'm going to share one more story. There was a man who was a tightrope walker, and he was a very famous tightrope walker, and he had done tons of canyons. I mean, crazy, crazy, crazy heights with no kind of safety harness, with nothing. And there was a point where he was wanting to do something that had never been done before. I believe it was walking between 2 canyons, and his name was Charles Wallenda. And he had walked all of these different, just crazy, world record setting, and he had done it with absolute ease. Well, Charles Wallenda went to do this new world record, and normally he would never even think about falling. He wouldn't talk about falling. He wouldn't think about falling. It wasn't even on his mind because he always had success. Well, this one certain time, he went to do this new record-setting walk, and he chose to personally supervise the installation of the safety cable. So if you can imagine the cable that's going to be going across the canyon, there would be a bunch of other cables tied to that, rooting it, basically keeping it attached to the ground so it would be safe for him to walk the tightrope, if you will. And at this point, he personally chose to supervise the installation of that thing and watch them install the wires. And he was concerned about falling the entire time, all of the 2 or 3 months leading up to the installation and the trial runs and everything else. He was concerned about, I hope I don't fall. I hope I don't fall, over and over and over and over again. And in an interview with his widow, after, she said for 3 straight months, all Charles could think about was not falling. And they call this the Wallenda effect, because he pictured in vivid detail the opposite of creative imagination. He pictured dread. He pictured worry of, this thing that I don't want. All my mind knows is that I am picturing something, and that whatever I am picturing, I'm giving a command to my brain that I want this thing to happen because I'm imagining it in vivid detail. This is what I want. Everything. How would it feel to fall? What would it sound like? It's everything that he was going through. I don't want to fall. I don't want to fall. Just like me. I don't want to roll my ankle. For 3 months, all Charles thought about was falling. And on that fateful day, he fell and perished. That's called the Wallenda effect. Now, you can use your imagination. You can create your future for worry, for the worse, or you can actually create your future in a positive sense. You can create a picture of what you want and go from the goal, not to the goal. Do this every day. Get a picture. Come from that. Who does that person act like? How are they acting every single day? What's it feel like to be them? What's it look like? Everything about their life, and live in that reality every single day. Auto-suggest. Feed that thought to yourself over and over and over again. Turn the clear water blue. Do this every single day. Work it like a muscle until you can hear that song and that idea connects immediately, and you can feel what it would be like to be in that moment as if it has already happened. You are creating a memory of the future, but you're creating a memory and you're acting like it has already happened over and over and over. And I can tell you, friends, when you hit that goal, when that thing that you've been thinking about, visualizing, picturing, feeling every single day, one or many times a day, when it actually happens, it'll feel like deja vu. It'll feel like, you know what? I've been here before, because you have. You've been there hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times in the theater of your mind. I hope you use your imagination for creativity instead of worry.